Future of Freight Festival in Chattanooga, Tennessee is the event of the fall. Subscribers to Check Call have a special discount code for F3 registration. This is going to be one of the best deals on F3 tickets. Use the code CheckCall F324 at checkout to take advantage of this offer. See you in Chattanooga. Welcome back to another edition of Check Call. Don't forget to subscribe to Check Call, the newsletter on FreightWaves.com if you haven't already. Today, we welcome Ben Barnes, Chief Information Officer at McLeod Software. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ben.
Thank you for having me.
I'm excited for today because as a former freight broker, I have used McLeod and I have seen the benefits that it can have. And I'm excited to get into kind of the meat behind it. But before we get too far into this, let's get some background on you and kind of how you got started at McLeod.
So I started here when I was 12. I think I've been here 28 years. So from the ground roots, we're very organic, as a lot of people know. So coming through the age of TMS and maturing TMSs, and then as into the cyber world and cybersecurity as it evolved and made a critical impact on our industry. Entrenched myself around that some and understanding it and trying to spread the awareness of just how it impacts a logistics or a transportation firm.
I like that. That is something that is all too, what do you want to say, prevalent in this day of age, into this day of age. Okay, this day and age is kind of that data security aspect. And that's what I'm excited to talk about more today, because it's something that, when you think about it as a freight broker, whether you're a small one or maybe you think about it more if you're a large broker, but you have that data security part of things. And it's more than just like, don't click on a phishing email or don't open attachments from people that we don't know. So it's like, why should a freight broker ultimately at the end of the day care about data security outside of just like, I might protect myself from fraud or am I protecting my customers? Like, why is it so important?
Yeah, so fraud is prevalent in the industry, and whether it's on a load board or something happens, data is life for a logistics operation, right? And knowing that, understanding that, you have not only the fraud from that, but just imagine if your email gets taken over and somebody starts hijacking loads that are negotiated, swapped on email. That's just a small sector, and that goes into the ransomware attacks that are happening. 5 or 10 years ago, those were easy to spot. In today's day and age, it is much more sinister and much more directed. And so, there are, and just this year, a couple of large logistics operations who have been shut down for weeks and going into months just from a ransomware attack, just hijacking the data and holding them for ransom. So it has become life. It is life. Data, without it, it's a critical component of how we do business and how we operate in our industry.
I think that something that everybody kind of overlooks is that, just because there is ransomware and there is all these different type of cyber attacks, everybody thinks like, oh, well, we're a logistics company, we're a freight brokerage. We might be pretty small. We might not have, billions of dollars of revenue a year. So like, we don't really need to worry about that because we're so small, we're not a target. But I think the thing that everybody forgets is that it doesn't matter how big or small you are. They just want a target that is, because if they can get 5 small brokerages to give them $20,000, $30,000 each versus maybe heading one big cash cow, those smaller to medium-sized brokerages are still a possible threat. They're still a target because they might be easier to get some money out of versus, trying to take on a mega large brokerage that has some of those sales safes in place.
Yeah, for sure. And I call that a drive-by attack, right? So if I can just drive by an attack and get $10 from everybody I go by, then hey, at the end of the day, I've got a little bit of a money pile here. So that comes with very targeted attacks, and it comes with just the easy, hey, I clicked on the wrong link and exposed my whole company, and if they make a half a Bitcoin from that and move on, they don't. It has become the point of very organized cyber gangs that do this. So there's a strategy to it. There's a whole building block system that goes into play on how they do it and who gets paid and where it gets paid. And they do not care at all about who you are, what company you're in, what industry you're in, as long as they make their $5.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I think a lot of people kind of forget about or maybe overlook is that, they're not going to, because obviously, yes, they're going to target the big white whale. They're going to want the big payday, but that's a lot more work. That takes a lot more effort. You're not going to be as successful versus some of the little ones, which I don't love that, if I'm being honest. I kind of wish the criminals would only target those that made it's like $700 billion a year. But sadly, criminals don't listen to what I want. So
yeah, or me, unfortunately.
So kind of it's been all over the news, obviously different ransomware attacks, different you name it, any kind of fraud, any kind of attack, any kind of cyber thing. I feel like it's all we've been reading about lately. So as you read these news stories and as you see these things happen, what lessons do you take away and turn around and implement into your brokerage?
Yeah, so the biggest one I could recommend is just be prepared, right? Have a plan, have an incident response plan. And I'll relate it a little bit to, if you have a health event, if you have a heart attack, we all have been trained on CPR in the past, right? Or a lot of us have. So there's somebody usually standing around that knows CPR. Well, you can apply that to the cyber world also. You need to be prepared. And to do that, I've actually taken the CPR acronyms and say communicate, prioritize, and recover. So recovering is a key component of that. But the first thing you have to do is communicate. And if you're not prepared for that, if you're not prepared to do CPR, you don't know anything about it. So there's a little bit of process in that. And you're right, it's been in the news lately. And it's not just all been cyber, right? CrowdStrike had an event recently. That wasn't a cyber attack. That was just where they pushed out some patches that blue screened a lot of PCs, and I'd like to say a lot of PCs just in the country, but it actually happened in the world. It started over in Australia first, which gave us about 6-8 hours head start on before the business day started to start working on it. So yeah, there's a motto out there of I call it the ostrich effect. Pick your head up out of the sand. Don't be the ostrich. Think about the what, the if, the when, and how you would handle that. And a good way to do that is, you can start with a big, long, drawn-out incident response plan, which from an IT person you want to have. But if you put that aside just for a minute and go for just a CPR approach, that's a really good way to communicate, prioritize, and recover.
I think that's a really good thing that you brought up is you have the long, drawn-out incident response plan. And if you don't have it, hey, maybe I know what your end of the year goal should be.
That's right.
Out there.
That's right.
But you have that really long incident report. And yes, it's valid. It's important. Everybody has it. But at the same time, kind of like in the ER, like there are steps that you do to take something, but you also have to stop the bleeding. And I think that's where the CPR comes in is like, you need to do something that just stops the bleeding and gets it under control. So that way you can kind of at least like get your hands around it and then implement that long response or that maybe longer response steps, because that's going to fix everything. That's going to allow you to figure out how bad it is and everything like that. But at some point in time, you just have to stop the bleeding and metaphorically stop the bleeding. I hope that no one's actually bleeding. Yeah. But you kind of have to stop that, because I think that's something like we practice fire drills, we practice, tornadoes or earthquakes or whatever. How do you even begin to practice, this plan? Obviously you don't want to intentionally push out a code mistake and then, shut down your work for the day as like a test. How do you go about like testing if your plan is effective and if it works, other than just have a plan and hope for the best and hope that it's not a problem?
Right. So, you have to set the right culture, and you hit it perfectly. Fire drill, tornado drill. It's very similar, except it's just a company drill, right? It's a business impacting drill, whether that's business continuity, and that's really what it comes down to. Whether it's a cyber attack or a CrowdStrike attack, or take a fire, for example. What happens if and there have been brokerage firms that have their building that have caught on fire or tornado. And actually at our conference, we're going to have a few panelists speak about just that. How do you recover from that next day? But taking that, and setting the company up and doing that exercise, right? And you're not really announcing it. You at an executive level or you at an IT level, lock the door one morning and stand in front of it and say, the building's gone. What do you do? That's the only way to really, it's like backups. If you don't ever test a backup, you don't really have backups. If you don't really test your plan, you don't really have a plan. And that's easy to say. It's hard to do. But at some level, even if you do, 20% of that plan or 50% of that plan, you are better prepared, because when a cyber attack happens, when that disaster happens, everything's going to line up just right. It's going to be, the perfect storm. You're going to have payroll due that day. You're going to have the biggest business deal of the year going on. Your IT guy is going to be on a cruise ship and unreachable by phone. Everything that can line up will line up. So be prepared for that. Be prepared for the worst case scenario. And, hopefully it is like CPR or like a tornado drill. You never need it, but you're prepared for it if you do.
I mean, I've even heard of some people that as they go and come up with these plans, they have different data centers all across the country. And every couple months, they say, okay, well, we're going to switch everything to come out of this one, or they switch whatever their main one is, just so if something happens to that physical building, they can move everything and keep running operations, even if their building's not physically there. And so I think just stuff like that, that's something as simple as, just kind of making sure that you can move your data and still get to it. Because sad to say, the trucks and transportation don't stop just because the world doesn't stop just because, you had a bit of a cyber attack or your building had a catastrophic event.
Exactly.
So how do you kind of touched on it a little bit, but like, how do you really, okay, so we had a drill, right? And in theory, you're having these drills. First of all, how often should we have these drills? Like yearly, quarterly?
Yearly at least. Yeah. Planning probably more than that, but really you want to take a yearly stance and make it part of your repetition, and get through that. The first one's not going to be perfect. The second one's not going to be perfect. None of them are going to be perfect, but you're going to learn something each time. And the more you can do them, even if it's at a yearly cadence, the more you're going to learn.
I think so. What is the biggest thing that you should do after you've done this, this drill, right? So should the biggest kind of focus be on reviewing what you did well, areas of improvement, and then how do you implement that for the future? Is that even something worth looking at?
Sure, it's all worth looking at. I think the biggest thing is communication. Without that, nothing else exists. On day one, on moment one, how do you communicate? Who are those people that you bring into your fold? What does your toolbox look like? And take a fire, or tornado, or a massive cyber attack. You have no phones, you have no email, right? How are you communicating? How are your customers communicating with you? How are you communicating on to carriers or other components? How does that look? I mean, again, data's life for a logistics operation. So no email and no phone. How do you function? And so that's step one, right? To me, and now you can go beyond that, and that's what you want to do is you have multiple drills and maybe over multiple years. But step one is if your building's gone, your phone system's gone, well, your main number goes into a building that no longer exists or can't be answered. What does that look like? How do you communicate? That to me is ground zero.
Yeah, I think that's really important because there's so many like going on that if you have a cyber attack, there's so many brokerages that have switched to kind of like an integrated phone system.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily just, oh, I have a desk phone, so I'll just pick up the phone and call. Like, no, it's all integrated into a system of some sort, which is obviously very handy for 99.9% of everything else. But that 1% of, oh, we have an outage. Okay, well, now I can't call anybody. I'm also trying to figure out if I was in that position, how would I call my carriers and my shippers other than just hope that my personal phone works and I hopefully can access their phone numbers, which you might not be able to if your system's completely locked. So that is that's something that I did not think about, and now I'm kind of stuck in.
Right. So right, yeah, you have your phone, right? You have your cell phone. Great, that's good. Who do you call? What number do you know to call? They're and if you want to reroute your main number into your business, who's your provider and what number do you contact to have that number rerouted to your cell phone? Right? I mean, that there's a lot to think of there.
I mean, like maybe hope you can search an email on your phone if you have email set up on your phone, but depending on what it is, that's a slippery slope that we've just gone down that kind of hurts my brain. But I mean, it's good that people like have to think about it and figure it out. But one of the things that I think you kind of have to balance is there basically, I like to think there's like a boogeyman hiding outside your virtual online door, like they're waiting to get you and do whatever. And so, but that being said, like it's more than just a phishing email now. It's not just like, oh, I want this. I'm like, oh, can you send me some gift cards? Love the CEO. Like it's more than just that now. It's even people posing as carriers and customers and other things like that. And also, if my shipper gets hacked, then suddenly I have to be more on alert from any email posing from that shipper because I don't want to, my mom works in accounting and she had someone contact her about a shipper's banking information change. It was on their letterhead. It was everything. She's like, that's weird. So she called and said, hey, did your banking information change? And the shipper said, no, sure didn't. And she goes, oh, well, we just got a letter on your letterhead saying that we need to change it to this. And they said, okay, cool. Thanks for that. And that wasn't necessarily her company. It was that happened to one of her vendors. So how do you really look at, making sure that you have the right response to a potential incident or a potential hack, versus kind of making sure that you still also train your employees on it? Because obviously, in my mom's case, as she figured out that this was happening, they implemented a new rule that you have to call your point of contact at that shipper to verify all of the banking information, not the number on the paper. You have to contact the person that you have contacted before. So that was something that they were able to do. But how do you kind of balance the making sure that you're protecting yourself against these threats versus also, keeping everyone up to date on any possible threats?
Yeah, so it's tough, right? And it only takes one. That's the problem. They may try 100 times and only one, or 1,000 times and it only takes one. So you're right. The business email compromise and taking our letterheads on the internet, your guys' everybody's letterhead is out there in some form. Taking that, spoofing it becomes real easy, and it comes down to a couple of things for me, and advice I give is you just slow down, trust but verify. And that's, I call it happy clicking. Don't happy click. Don't happy answer. If something seems out of place, it's probably out of place. And that goes, our digital age moves so fast, and our personalities are to do things quick, and that's good. And that, business moves at the speed of light. But when it comes to change, something out of the ordinary, you have to slow down and really think, is this right? And it's the old analogy, nothing's ever free. It's the same thing here. Now, if it's too good to be true, it's probably not true. So picking up the phone and validating, are you a real carrier? Are you a real accounts receivable? Are you a real bank? Are you that there's nothing that can substitute for that voice conversation, and that can be spoofed too. There's no 100% right approach. But if you just take that time to slow down, if something seems off, it's off.
Yeah, and I think that's where that broader conversation of, you need to figure out where your risk level is. So if you are someone that likes to play fast and loose and just takes whatever is sent to you as gospel, that's fine. Just know that you're opening yourself up to quite a bit of risk. Whereas if you are more risk averse and you do the trust but verify and you verify everything, then you know that you've done everything within your power to protect yourself. And if something happens, then unfortunately something happens, but you know that you did everything that you could to make sure that you protected yourself. And I think that that's another thing. Everyone needs to get comfortable with their level of risk, because it's going to happen, and it's going to happen more often.
100%. And our industry takes a little more risk than other industries just by nature. So we're a little more accepting of risk, and this is the area that maybe more accepting of risk isn't always good. Just, we have to find that fine balance, and each one of us, each business has a different level of that. So
Yeah, I think that it's quite an interesting world for everyone to be in. So I have two more questions for you before we're out of time today. So the thing that's happening a lot in the transportation world is that, we're getting all of this technology, and that's something that obviously we didn't quite have the technological advancements 10 years ago that we do now. But that being said, you have more integrations, more partnerships, which is great for providing more solutions. But how does that, like, if it's me going to someone, what do I have to look for in a partnership, and how do those integrations, overall affect those end users? Is it something that I need to be careful of when I go to source a new system to make sure that, those two integration partners take data security seriously?
yeah. Well, yes. You come back to the term we used a minute ago, risk, right? You need to do a risk assessment on that. And just because, cloud is the big thing, go cloud, go SaaS, and all of that's great, but validating that they have a security structure and posture can be as simple as just asking, what is your security measures? And a lot of times, and it's not as bad today as when kind of the cloud was first coming into the picture, but a lot of times those corporations didn't perform backups, or they had very limited backups. And just understanding what their commitment is, and really having that in your contractual obligation becomes pretty paramount. A lot more today than it was, yesterday or 5 years ago, as you mentioned, simply because you've got to cover those bases and at least vet that vendor out, or vet that customer out. It doesn't have to just be a vendor. It can just be a business partner of some type. Because you're exposing yourself if you're having that integration point, or sharing data, or just doing normal e-commerce type business from business to business aspects. So understanding that, again, there's no one size fits all. You've got to just take their information and put it into, a lot of times, like a service provider have an SLA. Does that SLA contain security language in it now versus just an uptime or backup, right? What does that look like? A lot of us have a security document or security brochure that we want to provide. We want the people we're doing business with to ask, because if they're asking, they usually have the same in return. So all of those things are there. The risk, it's measuring the risk and understanding if you're taking the proper steps to help reduce or mitigate that risk.
And I think that's something that a lot of people, I don't want to say like they often overlook, but they forget. And it's when you go to like vet a new TMS provider, telephone provider, you name it. When you talk about those integrations, that's something that they're typically very proud of, because obviously it's a lot of work to get an integration done. But to me, the second somebody starts getting cagey or unwilling to be, forthcoming, I'm not asking for the secret recipe for how your sauce is made. I'm just asking that, are you compliant with data, with data regulations? What's your backup plan for here? If you fail, what is that time? What is that uptime? How long am I left sitting here basically handicapped because of something that went wrong with you? And I think that the second somebody starts getting weird or not super forthcoming with those answers, that's kind of how you know that that's not a partnership you want to move forward in.
Exactly. Exit stage right.
And see yourself out. So that brings us to my favorite question of all of these interviews. And Ben, everyone that comes on the show has to answer this question. Could be the hardest question that you're asked all day. And I know we just went over some pretty tough ones. So Ben, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's not technical, is it? No, I'm good with technical. Yeah, hot dog. Hot dog is not a hot dog's its own food group, right? I mean, you can put so many different things on it. You can serve it in so many ways. It can be beef, it can be pork, it can be a sauce. Yeah, no, it's its own food group. It's not a sandwich. Sorry,
Ben. MVP guest right here, protecting our data, protecting us online, and has the correct opinion on hot dogs. I knew there's a reason I liked you. But I fully agree, because hot dogs, because Everyone says, oh, it's a sandwich. And I go, okay, if you walk into a deli or a sandwich shop to get a sandwich, a hot dog's never on the menu. Never.
That's right. And it's never listed under sandwich, even if it is. So
Exactly. It's its own thing entirely. I'm glad that you see it correctly. So, Ben, if anyone has questions on your hot dog take, or if they have any questions on, kind of how to build this resiliency plan, or how to come up with a CPR plan for their business, where can they find you outside the show?
So email is always good. ben.barnes@mcleodsoftware.com, on LinkedIn, or just, trust but verify. Give us a call, 205-823-5100.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Ben.
Thank you.
You can find Check Call the Podcast anywhere else you get your podcasts, like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Don't forget to check out all the other incredible FreightWaves shows. And don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/checkcall. See you on the internet.